Welcome back, everybody, to the live webinar here at BINA. I hope everybody is having a wonderful day. So some people saw the topic on Monday, but perhaps didn't watch the webinar and started to think that perhaps I'm getting a little bit delusional or something, or maybe I think you're delusional. Are you seeing me? Am I seeing you? What is this all about? So obviously, thank God, I'm still with it. I know that you're all seeing me and hearing me. That's not the issue. The whole discussion over here is when halacha, when Jewish law says that I need to see something or I need to hear something, what is the meaning of that word, seeing or hearing? Does it mean it as loose as we mean it? So when I say hearing and seeing, I don't care how you see me or hear me, you're hearing me and seeing me. But when halacha says it, and as a requirement from Jewish law to hear something, for example, the Megillah, or to see something, as we'll go through many examples today, a couple of examples today, if seeing it through a webinar, or Skype, or FaceTime, or all of these type of things, is that considered seeing and hearing? That's the discussion. So on Monday, we discussed various opinions. Two great halachic authorities discussed this regarding Megillah, hearing the Megillah on Purim through a microphone or a phone. Rabbi Moshe Feinstein seems to be more lenient and says that it is good for certain things. Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, the great halachic authority who lived in Israel, seems to argue with that. But what I want to do today is bring a couple of examples, a few examples, where this would be relevant, where this discussion would be important. Can I fulfill my obligation in hearing or seeing something through webcam or live surveillance, or all these type of things? So the first example is quite a tragic one, but it's an incredibly important example and it has great weight in Jewish law. And that is regarding proof of a husband's death, God forbid. Of course, in order for a woman to remarry, there needs to be one of two things. Either she needs to be divorced or her husband has to have passed away. Now, in order to know that the husband has actually passed away, there needs to be proof. And the best form of proof is, of course, witnesses. So the question is, if one saw, God forbid, a man who is not alive through a video, through live surveillance and all these type of stuff, is that considered good enough proof to allow a woman to remarry? The Ein Yitzchak, Rabbi Yitzchak Elchanan Spector, says regarding a photograph that if someone sees a photo of somebody not alive, that is good evidence that they are not alive, and he brings a number of proofs for his opinion. So applying the same logic to videos, seemingly it's even better than a photograph. However, I was thinking that actually perhaps it's not as good. And as technology gets more advanced, perhaps actually photographs become less proof. He lived quite a long time ago, where it was probably much more difficult to Photoshop and do all those type of things, whereas nowadays it's much more easier. So perhaps one can say actually that the more technologically advanced we become and we're able to create things, either in video or in photo, it might become even less proof. Now, obviously, this is an incredibly important question and should never be taken as a ruling over here, as a halachic ruling. One should obviously consult a halachic authority should, God forbid, the need arise. Another example where this becomes important is regarding marriage. So the way halachic marriage works is that the husband gives, or the husband-to-be, the man gives a ring, this is the way it's done nowadays, gives a ring to the woman and says a proclamation, behold, you are betrothed to me within the laws of Moses and the Jewish people. However, that is not enough. In order for that to be halachically, legally binding, there needs to be two kosher witnesses who witness that event. Now, what's important to point out is that the purpose of the witnesses here is actually not for proof. In fact, if a man and a woman come and they say, we got married, the man gave a ring and all of the requirements were met, everything was perfect, just one detail was missing, there wasn't two witnesses who saw it. We did it alone, privately in a room. That would be considered nothing. Nothing had happened there. Because in order for marriage to work, there has to be two witnesses, even if they both agree that it happened. Even if both the husband and wife agree that it happened, Torah says it's a law, not necessarily is there a reason for this, that there needs to be two kosher witnesses who witness the event. So here's the question. How about if there are two kosher witnesses who witness the event through live video, through Skype, through FaceTime, through surveillance video? Does that work? Now, here we actually have two opinions. We have the Rashba's opinion, which the Ramah, Moshe Isserles, brings down the Jewish code of law. That in order for the witnesses, obviously they're not discussing video because they lived way before video, but they're discussing something else. In order for witnesses to be kosher witnesses, in order for it to work, he says, they actually need to see the action of the man giving the ring to the wife. It is not enough for him to hear the man say, I'm about to give a ring, turn around, and then turn back around and see, oh, the ring is on the woman's finger. Obviously, he gave it to her, right? What else could have happened? No, he says they actually have to witness the giving over of the ring. There's another opinion. The opinion... There is another opinion of the Mordechai, who says that no, as long as the witnesses have witnessed some sort of circumstantial evidence that this marriage has happened, then it is a good marriage. Now, depending on which opinion, you would take a different approach. If you go like the opinion that the witnesses actually have to see the transfer of the ring from the man's hand to the woman's hand, then this whole discussion would be dependent on what we spoke on Monday. Is seeing something through a video halachically called seeing, or is it not? But if you say that actually the witnesses don't have to see the actual transaction, they just have to know that it happened through circumstantial evidence, whatever it is, but they have to actually know that it happened. So seeing it through a video is knowing that it happened. Even if you say that seeing through a video is not considered halachically seeing. So either way, it seems like you could be more lenient. However, there is another important point here, that perhaps the requirement for witnesses is not only that they should see, perhaps there's also a requirement that they should be present. In other words, that marriage has to take place in the presence of two kosher witnesses. If that's the case, then video obviously would not work. Once again, obviously, this is just a discussion in theory. When it comes to practice, obviously, we have two kosher witnesses standing there, seeing it actually there, and we obviously would never rely on this. Another very interesting question when it comes to seeing is when it comes to the concept, the ceremony called chalitza. So just a little bit of background on what chalitza is. The Torah says that if, God forbid, a man passes away without having children, there is a requirement that the wife, the widow, should marry that man's brother. However, obviously they don't have to. If they don't want to, there's a way out. And the way out is a process, a ceremony called chalitza. It involves the woman taking off her shoes, spitting on the ground, the whole ceremony that the Torah describes. However, in order for the ceremony to be valid, there needs to be a Bezdin, a Jewish court, watching this ceremony. The Shvus Yaakov brings an interesting question. He says, how about if they look through glasses? Is that considered seeing it? Or is that considered seeing it through a glass? And he's discussing this concept of chalitza, and he says no. He says seeing it through glasses is seeing it, it's just seeing it through a glass that maybe enhances their vision. But you're actually seeing it, it's not like a created image. But you can't bring a proof from that to video, because video is different than glasses, obviously. Glasses is seeing it just through a glass. This is different. This is a created image. This is not actually you seeing it. Another place where this would be relevant is when it comes to seeing a king. Now, we don't really have kings nowadays, and it's actually questionable whether we should be making these blessings when we see a king. The basic criteria for a king is that in order to make a blessing with God's name, there is a specific blessing when one sees a king, and there has to be a king who is able to kill people if he wants to. In other words, he has that authority over life and death, which we very rarely have nowadays, obviously. But when one sees a king, both Jewish and non-Jewish, there is a specific blessing which they need to make. How about if you see a king, in theory, if we see a king through a video, would we have to make that blessing? The Chidah brings an interesting case. What happens if you see the king through a window? Is that considered seeing the king? So he brings a proof that you could make a blessing in such a case, and he brings a proof from the Gemara where the Talmud tells us that Rav Sheshes saw a king and he made a blessing, and Rav Sheshes was blind. So if a blind person who obviously can't see the king, he just feels that he's in the presence of the king, has to make this blessing, so for sure seeing through the window, he needs to make the blessing. However, you cannot bring a proof from that to video. Why? Because there, it's not about seeing the king. In certain cases, which we've discussed, it's about seeing. Here it's not about seeing. Here it's about feeling the awe of the presence of the king. When one feels in awe of the presence of the king, they bless God for that feeling, or for giving this honor, this prestige to the king. So on the contrary, a blind person who is present feels the fear much more than somebody sitting thousands of miles away watching it on video. So not necessarily would we make a blessing, would we make this blessing while watching a king through a video. There is a debate amongst halachic authorities when it comes to the concept of Chol of Yisrael. Chol of Yisrael is that in order for milk to be considered kosher milk, it needs to be watched by a Jew in order to ensure that no non-kosher milk from a non-kosher animal has been mixed in. Now, there is a halachic debate. How about nowadays when you have surveillance cameras and you can watch if anything was added or not? And of course, this is subject to much debate. The more stricter opinion would say that no, in order to be called Chol of Yisrael, Jewish milk, there has to actually be a Jew present, but of course there are other opinions. Obviously, once again, all of this discussion is all in theory. In order to know what to actually do, one should obviously consult their own rabbi. Wishing everybody a wonderful day and a good Shabbos, and we'll see you all on Monday once again.